One of the biggest action icons and well-known movie soldiers of all time is John Rambo. Rambo burst onto the scene in 1982 with First Blood, followed by several sequels that had much higher kill counts in action. The first Rambo movie, First Blood, is really an examination of a Vietnam vet struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder and difficulty fitting back into American society. The movie relies heavily on the characters building up the mystique of Rambo and why he's this killing machine. Now in First Blood Part 2, the sequel, we see the killing machine unleashed as he heads back to Vietnam and is double-crossed by a bureaucrat. A few years later, we see Rambo 3 and Rambo going to Afghanistan to rescue his mentor, Colonel Troutman. In 2008, Rambo 4 was released, and the film received mixed reviews. The movie seems to me to be a pretty good balance of the earlier films. It doesn't rush into Rambo just gunning people down, but spends some time exploring his character. Now, the movie has plenty of good action scenes, and Stallone, despite being in his 60s, plays the Rambo role really well. To me, I think this was probably the third best of the Rambo movies, with First Blood being the best, First Blood Part 2 being the second best. Now, First Blood is the best of the Rambo movies because, in my opinion, much like Rocky, it really explored his character. In the sequels, the action and the entertainment jumps quite a bit, just like in both the Rambo and the Rocky movies. The sequels didn't spend much time developing the story or really the characters much, and that's okay. They were great sequels. I liked watching them, but the first one for both those series were the best, or both those movie franchises were the best. So there's several things I thought Rambo 2008 did quite well. One was highlighting the brutality and suffering in Burma at the time. This is the backdrop where the movie occurs, and I think the film did a really good job showing what was happening, but also not overexposing the audience too much to it. In the movie, they were really good about showing something and cutting away quickly so that this didn't turn into a drama. Still, in general, I thought this was probably the most violent of all the Rambo films. One other thing I liked about the movie was that the film was set in the jungle, and to me this is really Rambo's stomping ground, where he learned to be a soldier and where I want to see him operate using guerrilla warfare. That's why I really like the second Rambo film more than any of the other sequels. That said, I would have preferred to see a slightly different storyline. In the movie, Rambo is convinced by some missionaries to go into Burma as they want to help the Karen people. Rambo's hesitant, but ultimately gets convinced by one of the women missionaries named Sarah to take them upriver. Now, Sarah says that she'd rather die for something than live for nothing, which seems to trigger Rambo. He takes the group upriver, and despite almost being killed by pirates, the missionaries press on. Soon the missionaries begin helping the Karen people, but their village is raided, and we see innocent women and children slaughtered, women beaten and killed, and the village burned. The missionaries are then taken as hostages and are soon being killed in these horrific ways, like being fed to the hogs. Rambo is soon hired to take a group of mercenaries upriver so they can extract the missionaries wherever they are being held. Now, Rambo, being Rambo, soon ends up leading the group, and they're able to extract the missionaries in the middle of the night when most of the soldiers are at a party. The mercenaries get split up from Rambo, and the next morning the Burmese soldiers begin tracking them. The mercenaries are found, and just when they're about to be slaughtered, Rambo shows up. He takes over an M2 machine gun and from an elevated position begins gunning down the corrupt Burmese soldiers. Soon the mercenaries start helping, and then the Karen rebels come too. Once again, Rambo has saved the day. To me, the film felt a lot like First Blood Part 2 in terms of going behind enemy lines in the jungle. Of course, there were certainly differences. In First Blood Part 2, we see Rambo being tortured and he's motivated to get back since he was betrayed by Murdoch. One other similarity in these movies has to do with Rambo and his feelings toward our female protagonist. In Rambo 4, Sarah, despite being engaged, is someone Rambo seems to care for. This isn't out of character for him, as we see the same type of relationship develop in First Blood Part 2. In that movie, Rambo is guided in by a young Vietnamese woman named Chow. She's eventually killed, and in one of the great Rambo scenes I think of all time, we see Rambo rise up and put on Chow's necklace. Then a bloodbath ensues. As mentioned, I thought the storyline was good in Rambo 2008, but not great. I would have preferred to see an angry, vengeful Rambo. It didn't ruin the movie by any means, but I got frustrated with the missionaries and how ignorant they were. They ignore all his advice and seem to be shell-shocked once they're taken. I get they just wanted to help and stop the death, but they shouldn't be going into a war zone in a foreign country unless they know they have military protection. Unfortunately, this movie was the first Rambo movie without Colonel Troutman, played by Richard Crenna. Crenna died in 2003, and I would have liked to see him in this film, obviously. Of course, the script would have had to have been rewritten, but it would have been good to see him just one more time. So Rambo seems to find closure at the end of the movie, and we see him come back home to his dad in Arizona. At the time, I thought this would close out the Rambo story. He would essentially become a rancher or a farmer. However, that wouldn't be the case, as 2019, we saw another Rambo movie, Last Blood, which was okay, probably the second worst in the franchise behind 3. I thought Rambo 3 was really bad. Now there's talk we could have a prequel to Rambo, which I think could be interesting, exploring Rambo and how he became this fearless killing machine, how he was trained. That would be something interesting to see. I'm sure they're going to do it at some point.